Hi everyone, today we are here to discuss case study about export live animals. Hi everyone, before we start, I will introduce myself. I am Tanjai with matching number 270820. Now I will explain the introduction about export live animals. Exporting livestock through sea and air freight has been a staple of the Australian economy for nearly 200 years. Live animal export is also one of the leading employment opportunities for original person in Northern Australia. The Australian livestock export industry export the sheep, cattle, and goat to the key market in the ASEAN Pacific, Middle East, and Africa region. More livestock export cattle from Northern Australia and sheep from Southern Australia. Dairy cattle can export to milk, herds provide milk and dairy products to overseas community. Export of livestock is highly regulated and managed by the livestock export industry and the Australian government. The Australian Livestock Export Corporation and the Australian Livestock Exporters Council are the big industry body who, with meat and livestock Australia, provide the research and development, marketing, market access, and animal welfare program to advance the livestock export industry. Australian livestock export are community to improve animal welfare. Now, I will invite my friend SHELDON to share with us about the procedure of Australian exporting the live animal to other countries.
I am SHELDON with entry number 270742. Now I will explain the procedure of Australia exporting of live animal to other countries. Most livestock export travel by sea on purpose-built livestock vessels. Some livestock exports, such as dairy cattle and goats, are transported by air. All livestock exports are cared for by qualified stockmen. First of all, Australian live animal will be branding, weaning and growing on the station, then wait for the selection for sales by exporter. All livestock are kept in quarantine for a period before they are exported. Livestock exporter provide the livestock with the vaccination and health checks that required by each importing country. The livestock are fed the same food which they will eat during the voyage, so that they can get used to the new ration.
What is the next step after the animal selected by exporter?
Sheep and cattle livestock exports are loaded onto vessels and livestock ports. They work from livestock trucks, up ramps, and onto the ships. Each animal is inspected by an Australian Quarantine and Inspections Service veterinarian and inspector. Any animal that is not fit and unhealthy will not travel. All shipments must comply with the Australian standard for the export of livestock.
Before the animal loaded onto vessel at the livestock port, what should the exporter do?
The exporter need to ensure that the ships were loaded with enough food to feed all the animals and also provided additional contingency feeds. The selected Australian livestock will arrive at the export port. They are trucked to the export yard or directly transported to the ship on the Which Bridge. Throughout the journey, all livestock always have access to food and water. Some ships even have their own desalination equipment to replenish water during the voyage. On the way of the ship that is transported to the destination, all animals continually receive food and water. They are silent and have enough space to lie down. Each desk is well ventilated, and the temperature also is monitored. During the voyage, all livestock are taken care of by qualified breeders and crews.
What is the following step after the animal arrive at destination?
When the selected Australian livestock arrive at export yard, they are trucked to either a holding yard or feed lot, which generally under quarantine again. After all the Australian livestock had gone through and finished the quarantine process, the livestock will be slashed or feathered in a feed lot by using local products. Then the meat will be sold in the market.
Now, I will invite my friend AMANTA to talk about the rule of connecting party in exportation of the Australian live animal include Australian government agency and non-governmental organization.
I'm AMANTA HECTO with metric number 268952. I will discuss about the role of concerning parties in exportation of the Australian live animals, including Australian government agencies and non-government organizations. Live animal exports have been and continue to be a source of attention Many petitions have been presented to Parliament in order to put an end to the live export trade. Animal care policies in Australia are among the best in the country. The Australian government will not allow animal cruelty and will not negotiate on animal health requirements. Our continued participation in the livestock export trade allows us to control animal health conditions in importing countries. Among these concerning parties in exportation of the Australian live animals, Australian government agency has about these issues by implementing some rule and regulation regarding the export legislation on 28 March 2021. Since the Australian government is deeply concerned about this problem, it provides a greater degree of deterrent to those who may continue to disregard our regulatory requirements and limit our export markets by imposing a wider spectrum of fines and sanctions. It further advocates for more tailored enforcement action in case of non-compliance.
Amanda, can you give the example about the action taken by Australian government?
Yes, sure. Australia government has strictly about the Australian livestock can only be exported by a licensed Australian exporter and cannot be exported to all countries. Livestock exporters must comply with the Australian standard for the export of livestock and other regulations that underpin the exporter supply chain assurance system. Whoever export the live animal without license will be penalty. The current legal framework for livestock export is complex and comprises interacting Commonwealth, state and territory, and local government legislation and regulation. The Australian government is responsible for that part of livestock export related to trade and international relations. State and territory laws have a domestic focus and regulate the treatment of animals in each jurisdiction to meet animal welfare requirements.
Do the Australian government propose any rules and regulations to share their concern about this issue?
Regulation of the live export industry is primarily supported by the Australian Meat and Livestock Industry 1997 and the Export Control 1982. There is also subordinate legislation such as the first one is the Australian Meat and Livestock Industry Regulation or Export Licensing Regulation in 1998. The second one is the Export Control Orders Regulation 1982. And the third is State and Territory Animals Welfare Act. And the last one is Model Codes of Practice or MCOP that are prescribed by industry bodies.
For the following discussion, I will invite my friend Nagiri to sharing his opinion.
My name is NAGIRI ANDHIKA SULTAN with matric number 2688945.
Nagiri, assuming that you are the exporter of live animal to Indonesia and this case happened, what should be your response to this situation?
From a policy making a board that is not adaptive while public interest by the government Australia has hard producer with cattle to the state Indonesia. Presently, policy making indicate a domestic impact, which is bad for the beef cattle producer in Australia. Evident by record sales statistic, experience decline, unemployment, and creating the atmosphere was not conducive to thousands of beef cattle producers there. Make a policy supposed to do it is if the government has been able to produce a fair decision for both parties. In this case, the government should take a look the worst possibility both from the relationship side, across countries, as well as from a domestic perspective. Losses reached by the party that is have a lower bargaining position like power players in the beef cattle export industry in Australia, has described how Polish government can be a source of violence for the fulfillment of the security of group individual. Economic situation of Australian local who take it work as an exporter of beef cattle the main thing for Indonesian. Of course, of all the side is more vulnerable position to experiencing economic security threats. But it's not only about economic security. Indirectly, the policy to threaten the safety of the produce community beef cattle in Australia. More than 4,000 people in Australia who took up the industry export of local beef cattle to Indonesian threatened with out of business and some even already lost his job. Security committee in the most important beside economic security because the perceived impact of termination Australian beef cattle export are not felt only by one or two export cut in Australia. It's almost on all over Australia. Australia has experienced the decline in foreign exchange up to hit the $900 billion marks. If the interest of the beef cattle producer in the formulation of the policy is more considerate, there might be diplomacy recommendation with the Indonesian party that can be taken by Australian government not by suddenly stop exporting cattle slaughter, especially during a co-production Australian cut is on its way up holiday for a number of Muslims in Indonesia.
Nagiri, thank you for your sharing. Our discussion come to the end. Now, I will invite AMIRUL to discuss our last section for today's discussion.
Hi everyone, Hama Amir Hakim AZMAN, we met with number 270158.
Hi AMIRUL, based on your knowledge, why federal court judgment decide the import ban was invalid?
In the year 2011, a report was published by ABC Four Corners which portrayed a disheartening fact about the reality of the export of Australian live animals to Indonesia. The report revealed how the livestock is exploited by the Indonesian people. The footage where we found a slaughtering video of 50 animals in 10 various locations was attached with the report. After the report, a large number of Australian people signed a petition and also protest through free light and banner for a ban on the export of livestock from Australia. Due to this uncontrolled circumstance in Australia at that time, the federal government had to impose a ban on export. But later on in 2020, a declaration came out to the public stating that the imposed ban was invalid as per the judgment of the federal court. In 2011, when the slaughtering video was exposed to the world, the Agriculture Minister of Australia of that period announced a suspension on the export of livestock for the next 6 months. Because the minister had thought that this 6-month period would be enough to restructure the framework of export to Indonesia. But the decision caused a loss of sea amounting to almost $2.5 million to the Australian export. The country lost an opportunity to export around 2,776 heads of live animals during this period of the ban. The Northern Territory cattle companies suffered from a harsh amount of loss for this ban and asked the Australian government to pay adequate compensation, stating that the ban was absolutely invalid and unreasonable. Federal Court Justice Stephen Way came into the picture to deal with this argumentative scenario, concluding that the ban was really an invalid decision as the ban unsatisfactorily went strong and did not include any sort of exemption for the exporter. Before the ban was imposed, Australia exported almost 500,000 live animals to Indonesia, amounting to $400 million. Thus, his downfall from a successful export to a negligible amount of export after the ban made the country overall income from export was. The ban had a negative impact on the export business as well as the exporter. The federal court judge also said that the agriculture minister did not even take chance to communicate with the Indonesian government regarding the issue, and the minister also does not have any right to impose a ban like this way. According to the judge, it is very disappointing to know that the minister never considered the export business of the country and the loss to be suffered by the exporter. The agriculture minister sincerely unconcerned about why as per the Export Control Act 1982 and announced a ban without even providing an exception to the exporter. The federal court judge also added that it would be better if the minister would have made a control order instead of an export order. It was suffering for the two big live animal exporters in Australia. The decision to close down the export was not at all required.
That's all for our discussion. Thank you.